All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are here at the Natureplex. We started out outside, but the thunder started rumbling, so we're inside the Natureplex now in our theater. So welcome back to another Naturalist live chat today. So we have Memorial Day coming up this weekend. Hope everyone has a nice, safe Memorial Day weekend. And to kickstart your weekend, we're going to talk to you about some live we're going to talk to you about some native bees today for our live chat. So last Friday, we talked to you about honeybees. So you guys got to go inside of the our honeybees at the Nature Center. We got to go into the apiary, and you got to see honeybees. So let me show you. This is our honeybee friend. This is what you got to see last week. And the honeybee is Apis mellifera. This is the European honeybee. And so we talked a little bit last week about how this bee is a European honeybee. So it's a non-native bee, and it was brought over here, and it's been around for a long time, and it's considered a domesticated animal. So humans have been using the European honeybee for a very long time to produce honey, to pollinate crops, and it is very important to us agriculturally. It's very important to us to have as a food product. So it's the only insect that creates a food product for humans. So we do use a whole lot of honey here in the United States, and we also use this animal to produce a lot of food for us. So like almond production wouldn't be possible without this bee. So this bee can be transported around and be put on different crops, and the almond pollination wouldn't happen without this bee. So that's just one of the many, many crops that this bee helps. But what a lot of people don't realize is that this is not the only bee that we have. And so last Wednesday was World Bee Day. So Wednesday was World Bee Day. And so we're highlighting a lot of different bees. So in North America, we have over 4,000 different bee species. And when you are learning about bees and you hear about bees, you often hear about save the bees and how important bees are. And it's important to note that when people are talking about that, they're not really talking about the honeybee. So this bee is very, very important to us. We need it. We need it for food and crops, and we need it for things like that. But this bee we can actually build up. We can have lots and lots of different boxes of these, and we can move them around. And it's hard for beekeeping. It's hard to keep these hives alive. We do have non-native pest problems and things like that, but these bees are not the ones that are in serious trouble, mostly because this is an agricultural animal. This is a domesticated animal. So a domesticated animal is kind of like when you think about dogs, cats, chickens, horses, cattle. It's raised like those animals. It can be bred like those animals and reproduce like those animals, and it has its problems, and it has a lot of issues, and it's difficult, and it costs a lot of money, and you can have losses, and so that's a big problem. But when we're talking about we're having some power flickering in and out. But whenever you're talking about some serious declines of bees, we're talking about our native bees. So we've got this poster to show you, and I know it's backwards, but you look at all these different kinds of bees. So these are just North American bee species, and this is just a small sampling of some North American bee species that you can find here. This is just a map. You can actually find this image online. Just type in backyard bees of North America, and you can find some of these bees. Look at how many different sizes and shapes and colors and cool adaptations that they have. That's really cool. And I'm going to show you a few. Thank you, Miss Tammy. I'm going to show you a few different ones, some that you probably never even heard of. And so these bees are in serious trouble. And when you hear about bees being on the endangered species list. The honeybee is not on the endangered species list. There is a bee called the rusty-patched bumblebee that is on the endangered species list. And there are other bees that are currently being studied and watched, and their population is being monitored because they're in serious trouble. So some of the big groups of bees that we have, and you know about bumblebees, so that's one of our bees that can be in serious trouble. I don't know if you've ever heard of a leafcutter bee, but they cut these leaves. The reason they cut these leaves in these little round shapes is to plug up their nest with. They'll lay an egg in a hollow tube of a plant, and we're going to talk about that a little later, and they will plug it up with a little leaf. And so that's cool. You also have miner bees. Miner bees actually will dig little holes in the ground. There's all different kinds of miner bees. They're one of the largest groups of native bees. There's also mason bees. And so mason bees, very similar to, and this is just one kind, there's lots of different kinds. But mason bees are very similar to leafcutter bees in that they'll use those hollow plant stems, but instead of plugging it up with a little leaf, they'll plug it up with a bit of mud or clay or something like that. And then we've got some really cool agricultural bees, so bees that are important to us agriculturally. One of these is the southeastern blueberry bee. And so southeastern blueberry bees do something very special. They do something called buzz pollination. And so buzz pollination is something that honeybees can't do. So buzz pollination means that this bee can actually go up to a flower and buzz at a frequency that is just right for that flower. And when it buzzes, it's actually shaking the anthers of that flower at just the right way so that the anther releases the pollen. So if a bee comes up to the flower that does not do buzz pollination, it'll get some pollen off of the anther, but the anther is not actually going to release all of its pollen. And so while a honeybee can pollinate blueberries, it actually takes a lot of honeybees to pollinate blueberries. And that's because they're not very efficient at it, because they don't do buzz pollination. But that southeastern blueberry bee does buzz pollination, and so it can dance circles around a honeybee. And so that's really cool, and it's a native bee. Then there's also this squash bee. And so a squash bee will actually wake up way before a honeybee does. And usually they live under squash plants, and all members of the squash family. So you're talking squash and zucchini and watermelon and all those things. And they live underneath the plants in the dirt. And as soon as the squash flowers open in the morning, these bees are working those flowers. And they pollinate at a much greater rate than a honeybee does. And they usually will stay in the flowers. They'll breed in the flowers, they'll take naps in the flowers, and then they'll, even when the flowers close in the afternoon, they'll take a nap. And when they open in the evening, by the time the honeybees are going to sleep in the evening, if the flowers are open, these bees are still working them. So that's really cool. And Tiffany, we're going to talk about how you can attract native bees. So stay on here, because we're gonna keep talking about how you can attract these bees. So this is just a small sampling of some native bees that are here in North America and here in the Southeast. There are lots and lots more, and these bees are very, very important to us. We actually have a magazine that AWF puts out. So this is our magazine, and we have this spring issue. We have an article, Save the Bees. I know it's backwards, sorry. And we highlight several different kinds of bee species in this article, and we talk about some of these issues. So, what's the problem with these bees? Why are they vanishing? Why are some of them going on the endangered species list? Well, you hear about pesticides and things like that. What a lot of people don't realize is sometimes the pesticide is not a direct cause, it's an indirect cause. It means that so many people use pesticides just to get rid of weeds. Well, the thing is, a lot of these bees like weeds. They just like lots of plants and lots of things that are out and growing and more flowers that are out there. And honeybees really like non-native plants. And so studies have shown that honeybees will actually go to non-native plants more than they'll go to native plants. So if you are planting native plants, you'll actually attract native bees. And it makes the native bees really, really happy. And so I have some native plants, and these are from here at the Nature Center. So we've got some black-eyed Susans. These are growing in our pollinator field. A lot of native bees and butterflies really like black-eyed Susans, and these will bloom all summer long. And we have some Coreopsis, another native wildflower that'll bloom all summer long. And this is Stokes aster. This is a summer aster, and then planting fall asters is another great thing to do because then they'll have food not just in the summer, but they'll have food in the fall. But this one is a summer aster. Look how pretty that is. And we have several different, so we have some native hibiscus. I need to see the exact species of this, but if you look, there's a native bee taking a nap in this hibiscus. It was actually hiding. Let's see if I can zoom in. It was taking shelter from the rain inside this flower. And in some of the flowers, that's what they do. They'll take naps and they'll hide, take shelter inside flowers. That's really cool. So when we were out right before the storm, we found a bunch of bees huddled inside flowers. Did I say it backwards? They prefer non-native plants? I might have said something backwards. So native bees prefer native plants. Honeybees actually prefer non-native plants. Honeybees are non-native animals, so honeybees actually prefer non-native plants because they're non-native themselves. So this is a problem that people have found when it comes to honeybees, is that they tend to pollinate non-native plants. We don't really want that because they'll even pollinate non-native invasive plants and continue on invasive plant species. So honeybees actually, there's several studies, if you start looking, honeybees can actually have a detriment to the environment. While they're really great agriculturally, they're actually not the best environmentally. So we kind of want honeybees for our agricultural uses, but we don't necessarily want them for environmental uses. We want our native bees. So we want to make our native bees happy in native places. So we're going to talk about how we can make our native bees happy. We talked about what's wrong with bees, so we're taking away their habitat. They don't have enough native plants to forage on. We're taking away habitat, spraying pesticides, insecticides, things like the mosquito truck when it comes through and sprays things. It can also be killing your native bees. It kills all insects, anything that flies. If it's sprayed properly at night when nothing's flying, it's not going to hurt your bees. Just like if you're using insecticides and pesticides, herbicides properly according to the label, usually you're not going to cause a problem. These things cause problems when they're not used correctly. And so that's a big issue. Most of the time people misunderstand and it's an indirect cause of just people indiscriminately using it or not thinking about how that perfect green lawn, it's not necessarily that you're spraying those herbicides directly on bees hurting them, but you might have used it to create this perfect green lawn. Well, that lawn might not have anything for the bees. So habitat loss is a big problem. And so we're going to talk about how we can create better habitat for native bees. All right, do any native bees make honey? So that's a really great question. So yes and no. So to give you an example, the bumblebee. The bumblebee takes nectar back, and they will bring nectar back to their colony. And so some bees are social, and some native bees are solitary. And so when you think of honeybees are very, very social. They make huge colonies. Most of our native bees don't make huge colonies like the honeybee does. So a bumblebee is a social bee, but it actually makes a pretty small colony. And so they'll bring that back, that nectar back, and they'll put it in a little wax jar made what we call a honey pot. They've made a little wax container for it to be stored in. And they'll put that nectar there, and it may sort of kind of turn into honey. They may go through the process a little bit like honeybees do, but it doesn't have to be processed in exactly the same way because it doesn't have to last as long as honey does. Honeybees are going to stay alive, their whole colony, except for the drones, the male bees, they're going to stay alive all year long. They're going to stay alive and all through the winter when there's no flowers blooming, and they got to have something to eat, so they're going to eat honey, so they've got to have it stored up. Bumblebees, however, are not. The queen is going to go dormant during the winter, so they only need a temporary storage. So usually they don't make much honey. It's not nearly enough for us to consume. So there's a few other bee species that make honey, but it's not a lot, and it's not made in quite the same way. So when it comes to honeybees making enough honey for human consumption, or insects making honey for human consumption, honeybees definitely wear the crown for that. Where are honeybees native to? So they're European. Most honeybees are Italian honeybees. That's a typical, common honeybee is an Italian honeybee. So there's a few different kinds of honeybees, but none of them are native to North America. So we are going to keep asking questions. Y'all are asking great questions, so keep asking away. What we're going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around, and Miss Tammy is actually going to show us how to make a native bee house and show us a little bit about native bee houses, so that hopefully you can make one of these for your own yard, and then you can start attracting native bees to your home.
And I'm so glad you asked, how do I get native bees to come to my yard? Well, we talked about the first thing, they need to have something to eat. And native bees like native plants. Those flowers that are growing in your yard, just so you know, it's No Mow May is the name of the month. So you can let your grass grow this month and nobody will say anything. Maybe. Anyhow, natural places have natural food, but they also have natural homes. So we're going to make a bee house out of recycled items today. We're going to combine two things. We're going to reuse some old stuff, and we're going to use some natural things, and we're going to create a bee house. So mason bees and leafcutter bees like to put their young in tubes. They could be out in nature, they would find cane tubes, they would find old flower stems, they might find hollowed out branches, and like Miss Kristen was saying earlier, the leafcutter bee will put a little circle of leaf, she'll lay her egg, and her larva will hatch and grow, and she'll put a little piece of leaf in there, and then she'll stack another one, and then another one. And mason bees will do the same thing, only they make chambers down the tube out of mud. And they'll lay their egg, and the larva will stay in there with some food, and there'll be mud. And then she'll lay another egg, and the larva will stay in there with food while it grows, and then she'll put some mud. And so they fill up these long tubes that are found in nature. Other insects also use natural habitats, things that are found in nature. They need places to cover, they need places to hide, they even need places for temperature. So what did we gather? I went out into the forest and we gathered some things. We have some rocks from the river, and this is real important for your insect homes because insects are heliotherms. They like the heat to get up and move around. So why rocks? Rocks, old clay pots, broken clay pots, things like that will retain heat longer than some of your other natural items. So that's good. And then we found some things that have some natural hiding places. Some pine cones, some sweet gum balls. Look at all the little holes inside there. Places where things can hide and live and lay eggs. Then we have some bark. A lot of your native butterflies will spend the winter underneath bark. And I'm sure you've seen insect houses for ladybird beetles, ladybugs, that have places for them to hide and overwinter. So we have some shredded bark. And we have some leaves. You know, you can already see on some of these leaves they've been worked by something. Insects like to eat plants, and then insects who eat other insects eat those insects. So your habitat needs just not your pollinators and your flower drinkers, it needs all the things to be healthy and survive. So we've got some dried leaves, and then we have some sticks, because some things, like your decomposers, will just stay on the ground in between the sticks and the leaves and the debris. All right, now we have some recycled items as well. Here's what I have. I have some cardboard from a cardboard box. I have some paper, because we keep all our old paper and make notepads and things out of it. Recycle, reuse. Reuse. So we have some paper. I have these old, oops, I've got some sticks in there, but I've got these old juice jars cut in half. The 2-liter soda bottle that's been cut down. You can use smaller soda bottles too. And let's see, this is just some netting that was found, landscape netting, and you know, these are your grocery, what your fruit and vegetables come in at the grocery store, these little plastic bags. And then I have some paper rolls here. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Now, here's the tools we use to make our recycled bug house. We're going to use a stapler, Scotch tape, we're going to need scissors and a hole punch. If you like, some clippers to clip off the ends of your twigs, a ruler, and I've got 3 different size writing instruments here. Does it matter that they write? No. What's important is that they are cylinder shaped and they have different diameters, because different bees like different diameters. Not every bee is going to nest or lay its eggs in the same place. Okay, so what are we going to do with all these things? Well, if you'll look right here for a second, I'm going to take my recycled paper, I'm going to roll it around my writing implement, and I'm just going to roll it on up, and when I'm done, I'm going to have a nice little tube. Now, if you cut we're going to make this one out of 2-liter bottles. If you cut them about 5 inches, you snap this and you cut this in half, and you now have 2 recycled cane tubes that bees can use to lay their eggs. And we're going to put those inside our little container. Okay? So we have the paper. I'm going to make tubes out of the paper. Look at here. I already did that. So we have some paper tubes. We're good to go there. Now, I'm going to take my 2-liter bottles and cut them in half. And for this bug hotel, I have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one is 7. So the step 1, we're going to take our cut up 2-liter bottles and we're going to attach them together. And while they're empty and we attach them together, we're going to use a stapler and we're going to staple each plastic piece to the plastic piece next to it. Okay? Then I'm going to take my hole punch, and on the outside ring, I'm going to use my hole punch and I'm going to cut 2 holes about 1 inch apart. Okay, so now I have 7 2-liter buckets, or the bottoms of 2-liter bottles. I have about 2 foot of twine, and I'm going to take that and run it through the holes so that I can, when I'm finished, hang up my bug hotel. So they're stapled together, and now not only are they stapled, but they are tied and will hang together. And then I'm going to use those natural objects and those recycled items to stuff my holes. Remember how we talked about some rocks and pottery shards to maintain heat and temperature. We put some of those in and put some of those in there in an old toilet paper tube. We've got some bark shreds here. So what you're going to do is stuff each of these bottle bottoms until things will not fall out. So we took some cardboard and rolled it up into these little tubes. And so you can put that in there, little pieces of cardboard, and then remember our paper tubes for the bees, mason bees and leaf cutter bees, and we're gonna put our little paper tubes in there. You can trim them down to size. And then I'm also gonna take some of those sticks that I picked up. I'm gonna trim those down. I'm gonna put them in, creating lots of little hidey holes. I'm gonna do one more thing. I'm gonna use this vegetable, this is from avocados, this vegetable bag here. I'm gonna get some old leaves. Because remember, my insects need places to hide, things to eat. And not only is this going to attract native bees and your native insects, and you do want native insects in your gardens and around your house. They all serve a good purpose to eat other bugs and keep pests away. But they're food for things like frogs and toads and salamanders and lizards and all the other things that you want to keep your pests away. And I'm going to stuff my net full of leaves inside. And that's going to hang there. So now I have all of my bottoms filled up. See if we can get it to hang here for you so you can see it. Not gonna lie, you might want to use a little hot glue while you're at it. One thing you don't want to use though is plastic straws. Paper's good, cardboard's good, plastic bad. So we're just going to use the plastic bottoms to hold everything together. Now, you don't want it swinging from the breeze either. What you do want is you want this to be anchored somewhere. If it's on your house, you want it to be 5 feet or above. If it's on a stake or a pole, you can put it down closer to the ground, 2 to 4 feet. Different insects like different heights. Every animal has something specific about it. So that's our recycled feeder for today. Let me show you one you can purchase. It was a lot of fun making that. But you can also purchase insect hotels online or at your local garden store. This one has the canes and the board holes, and there's your butterfly spot right there.
And Tiffany, there should be a back. You want a back on each one. So we didn't cut the bottoms off of these, so it's just open on top. And you should have different diameter tubes, so that's why there are 3 different diameter implements. So
between 4 and 10 millimeters.
So she made paper tubes out of each one of these so that there would be different diameter tubes so that each one, they can choose which ones they want.
And this particular bug motel, the plan for it is from Ranger Rick magazine by the National Wildlife Federation.
All right. Thank you very much, Tammy. And I'll flip you around. And so that's what we have for you today. Hopefully you can make your own bug hotel. If you have bug hotels and you've got something living in it, please share it with us. We want to see it. So share below, comment here on the video, and share with us. We want to see what you have in your yard. If you have some native bees that you have flying around in your yard and you can actually take a good picture of them, please share with us so that we can see what's buzzing in your yard. Hope you have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.